to Typecast Heroes, where we believe typology can save the world. I'm Amanda Fogelson.
And I'm Jesse Miller, and today we are going to be continuing our Versus series, so where we compare functions. And today we're looking at the intuitive perceiving function, so extroverted intuition versus introverted intuition.
And just as a quick reminder, we say this in the beginning of every single video, that we believe anyone can be anything. And while we wholeheartedly do believe that, the Versus series that we've been doing, the main focus is going to be not just the behaviors that are consistent across people who are using these functions, but the motivation behind the behaviors. So if you were put in a situation, why you would choose the things you would do, not just the things that you would do. So be sure to keep that in mind as we go through this. We will give you guys some examples, and then we're also going to wrap it up by talking about the motivation behind it. And just take a deep dive into yourself and make sure that you really look closely at yourself and dig at your core and your default setting to make sure that you know who you are. So when you're looking to these, you don't automatically jump to a conclusion saying, I've been in that situation and I've made that decision, and that's for sure the function I use, because it might not be right.
Right, like we had our introverted feeling video, the introverted feeling versus extroverted feeling video come out, and one of my friends watched it and she said, I would have done everything Amanda did.
Mm-hmm.
But when we described the motivation, she was like, but I knew that I was an extroverted feeler because my thought process was extroverted feeling process. Yep. So that's what you have to look at. So intuition is particularly important. All of these Versus videos are important to us, but intuition is important because it is so vague. It is so hard to understand. And again, I've started giving this disclaimer, but I just want to put that out there one more time. Where I get my information is from Carl Jung, but it is also from a lot of Jungian analysts, and they're all listed below. You can look. It's not a secret. I'm not making this up. Like, this is not a hidden thing. So I pull from a lot of Jungian analysts, and I pull from my own research with working with thousands of individuals across type and the patterns that I look at. So that is where this is coming from. If you have any question about who does this person think she is, that is who I think I am. I just wanted to put that out there, because intuition is hard. There are a lot of internet battles, probably more over intuition than anything else.
Yep.
Actually, you know what? I would say that the arguments vary more on intuition than anything else. Like, so people honestly fight probably more over the feeling process, but
yeah,
it's like this particular thing is so varied. People struggle with it so much that you will see all sorts of crazy things. You'll see things from future telling to pattern making, which is what we believe, to anything that likes philosophical things, to it's just all over the place. People who get visions from God, there are all over. So that's why it's so important for us to explain these mental patterns of choices, which is what they are, because eventually when we get into differentiation and individuation, you have to be able to sort out like the spaghetti in your brain and figure out which functions you are using. And so if you are an intuitive, this is really hard for you, because this is a challenging concept to wrap your brain around. So we are going to do our very best today to give you some good explanation.
It takes a lot of introspection to really see these and how they manifest in yourself. So while it may be fairly easy to understand the difference between NI and NE, seeing it in yourself, it seems to like just not be as easy for others. So if you're one of those people where you're struggling maybe to figure out which function you're using, then please take us seriously when we say it's the motivation behind it. You could be doing, just like Jesse said, you can absolutely agree with me and say, I would do everything that girl does or everything this girl does, but yet the motivation, stroke your hair.
You can stroke it all day. It's beautiful. I told somebody the other day that it was my crowning glory.
But at the end of the day, you have to look at the why behind it all. And it makes such a huge difference, because what we preach here is having that language to use for yourself and others, to understand yourself and others more. And if you get these functions wrong, then it can change up everything. If you're trying to do personal growth or professional growth or anything like that, and you're looking at the wrong strengths and weaknesses that you may or may not have, then it could really throw you off course.
Exactly. So something else, last thing to keep in mind is that society, the MBTI community, I'm just going to say it like that, values intuition. And society, because we are moving towards innovation, and that's typically associated often unfairly with intuition, people want, and tests are skewed. I'm just going to say it. Tests are skewed towards intuitives. A lot of people think they use these processes when they don't. And Amanda and I have talked about in many videos how tuition really lacks practicality.
Yes.
At the end of the day. So I have noticed, I've watched a lot of MBTI communities. We probably are a little harder on intuition than most.
But it's just because no one else is.
There are some who there are a couple in particular who I can think of who are actually really hard on intuition. But we're just saying we are trying to present this as unbiased as possible, but it's also going to be really challenging for us because I'm an introverted intuitive.
And I'm an extroverted intuitive, and those are our hero functions.
So we have the self-deprecating thing going on. Yes. So keep all of that in mind as we continue. But we are, we've been doing this a while, so we are going to be as objective as possible. And we also are going to be pulling from examples from people who aren't ourselves just to help back us all up. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So, intuition as defined by Carl Jung, it is when you are looking at the hidden meanings and ideas and abstract concepts of the world around you or of your internal world. Intuition is advanced pattern making. Both types can appear as somewhat introverted because they're idea based, they're philosophy based, they're abstract based. They're based in things that are not physical, tangible, practical reality. So because of that, they can look similar. They can both seem very introverted. Any extroverted perceiver can seem very introverted because when they are looking at the world and if they are they're perceiving information, but their mind is jumping and putting together all of these ideas and patterns, they're not really interacting with the environment, so they can seem a lot inside their own head. So both of them can seem also kind of weird. I'm just going to put it out there. Both of them can seem a little weird or a little extra or a little out there. Particularly extroverted intuitives. Just
I'll
kidding.
own that. That's fine.
Just kidding. But I mean, they can come across as a little extra. They can come across as extra creative in all sorts of things. And so because of that, because of these behavioral stereotypes, it can be challenging to tell the difference. So let's talk about the difference per definitions of John Beebe, Daryl Sharp, Marie-Louise von Franz, Carl Jung, all of the people that I get this stuff from. Introverted intuition is when you are imagining these philosophical concepts inside your own head and you are building a framework for yourself. So introverted intuition is when you are applying, it's like you have all of these philosophical abstract concepts in your brain, and when you are looking at an environment, you're filtering through all the things that you see to see if you can put it in your framework, and if you can't, you don't even see it. You discard it. Extroverted intuition does not have a framework like that. Extroverted intuition is just interested in playing with the ideas. Their frameworks are judging based. They have a introverted feeling or introverted thinking judgment system that helps them with their framework. But as far as information goes, extroverted information means they're just taking it in. If there's not something interesting or unique in the room, they will make something up in their own head. Because, and again, that's how they can come across as introverted, because they like the ideas. They like the things. So the biggest difference between, I've been thinking about this a lot, the biggest difference between introverted intuitives and extroverted intuitives, they have a frame. They are building a frame of intuition. Extroverted intuitives, not so much. They're still seeing patterns, but it's all very much, it is a much looser system. It is not as focused. I'm just going to say it. I'm sorry. There are other YouTubers who disagree very strongly with this, but extroverted intuition is not as laser focused as introverted intuition.
Nope.
And I know this from talking to thousands of people and reading dozens of books and studying this. If you subscribe to Jungian philosophy, you cannot say that introverted intuition is not hyper-focused, because it is. The end.
Kind of like the foundation of what it actually is. Now, that's not to say that an extroverted intuitive would not be able to focus. It's just not coming from the same function.
Mm-hmm.
So if an extroverted intuitive is going to focus on something, hyper focus on something, or be dedicated to something or anything like that, it's going to come, majority of the time, it's going to be coming from introverted feeling or introverted thinking, which is going to be somewhere in their stack. One of those two will be somewhere in their stack. And that's typically the framework that as an extroverted intuitive you are building, versus that being the foundation of introverted intuition.
So let's go ahead and actually, because Amanda was mentioning that, let's go ahead and talk about some of our examples. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about is how research, because research is taking in information. Now, yes, I understand that you cannot look at these things in a vacuum, and judgment functions play a role. I understand. But again, if you are studying this so you can get to differentiation, you have to be able to break them down into pieces. You have to look at them in a vacuum. I get how futile that seems to some people, but if you are watching us, if you want to take this journey with us, and if you want to go on our system of self-growth, you have to be able to break them down. So when you are looking at research, an introverted intuitive, they already have a philosophy in their mind. Whether or not it was put together with TI, FI for TE or FE purposes, the point is introverted intuition is very focused. It's like a box they already have. And they are looking at information and they are trying to see how it can work within this box. I have given this example before, but for me as an introverted intuitive, I have gone through phases in my life of a box. So I was a vegan for a long time. When I was a vegan, things that didn't even seem like they had to do with veganism, like what kind of car I was going to drive, they had to fit that vegan box, or I would not, it was information that was not important to me. I would argue against it, or I would not even pay attention. It's like it wasn't my world.
I have a really good example, and I think I said this in another video in the past, but when NI has that box, everything somehow fits within that box. So real life example that just happened a few months ago, my husband came over here to say hi, and I was back at home, and we were about to start a new TV show, and the TV show happened to fit a stereotype of like a sad, weepy FI person. So when my husband walked in and he told Jessie that he was about to start watching that show, she was like, "That's such an INFP show." And he was like, "That has literally nothing to do with this." But it was just her first instinct was to immediately relate a situation happening right in front of her into the framework that she has dedicated all of her time and energy and life to at this point in her life. And so that's how NI works. Everything relates. Somehow everything can be related to what they are currently working on in their head.
And just to give an example that's not me, so there's an INTJ friend of mine who lives in New York, and he was talking about how, I want to talk about what happens when their framework shifts, because it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it can be really scary. He said, "You know what, I think I'm ready to be done with MBTI for a while." I was like, oh my God.
And end of the world.
Right? Because, well, he's one of my closest buddies who I talk theory with, but he was like, I couldn't do it. It has become such a part. I don't even know if he realizes how much of a part of him it has become. But thinking about stepping outside of this framework is really challenging. So we should actually talk about this when we do the NI versus SI video. But it's instead of being stuck in your own experience, it's like you are stuck on your own academic or philosophical belief system, like your own study, whatever you are looking at, and you will see patterns in it everywhere. My husband and I just watched a documentary of scientists, and it was really fascinating. But there was an INTJ, I typed him, I'm pretty sure he was an INTJ psychiatrist, and everything he was looking at, some guy drew the tree of life, and the INTJ went and he drew a brain around the tree of life, because for him everything is filtered through that lens, that psychiatric brain lens.
But then also bringing it back to Jessie, she just watched a documentary that had nothing to do about MBTI and literally sat there.
That's a good point.
And
I had it on a notebook.
And she's typing
there. All the people.
And the whole point for her, for watching the documentary, yeah, cool that he built this clock. Cool that there was a telescope. But for her, it was all about like, oh my gosh, here's 8 new people that I can type because it fits into my framework.
Oh my God, I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh my God. All right, so that's how NI researches, that's how they learn, that's how they study, through their framework. It's also why it's really hard sometimes for INTJs, INFJs, anybody who's ENFJs, ENTJs. Sometimes it can be hard for them to get into an academic subject that doesn't fit their objective. I don't see this as much as I see it with NE, but it can be a challenge for them if they can't make it fit. So
somehow, yeah.
Let's go ahead and talk about how NE researches what Amanda researches. Anything. What do you do?
So I will start with what I'm not just going to like go to Google randomly. I will start with something that I have decided I want to learn more about. It does not mean that I have already decided that I care about this. It doesn't mean that I've already decided my opinion on it. I could literally be researching this for hours and then the very next day have no connection to it whatsoever and not care at all. And it does not bother me at all because I just want information. I literally just want to take in all the information. I want to know a small to medium amount of information about every single thing the world has to offer. She wants to know about 3 things and know every single word that's ever been said about those 3 things. So that's the difference. It's the depth. In my mind, that's how I literally picture it, is her just like digging into like this tiny little hole and just digging and digging and digging and getting further down. Whereas mine, I just want to like tear up the whole field with like, just like very shallowly. I just want all of the information. So as I'm researching, typically what's going to happen is that I will start researching something. And then from that, like 2 or 3 sources in, I'm going to find something else is going to spark. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea about that. And then I'm going to switch my research into finding more out about that. I may never actually come up with the answer. It's like walking into Target. As a woman, it's like walking into Target where you go in there for one thing and you come out with 30 things and you don't have the one. That is NE research in a nutshell.
Yes, it is.
And again, taking it outside of looking at it as a vacuum, absolutely, NE users can absolutely dive deep into something that they are extremely passionate about that fits in within their FI or TI. I wholeheartedly believe that. I've experienced it and I know most of you have as well. However, looking at it in a vacuum, that's what it does.
So I've given this example in the INTP video where I was talking about how my INTP friend will consume an insane amount of information very quickly. He watches all of his YouTube videos on 2x and he reads very fast and he's very focused on consuming. And that's not our word, by the way. So other people associate extroverted intuition with this consume type of information, and that's okay. I agree with that term. But one of the things is, again, let's look at the motivation, because sometimes if introverted intuitives do not have a focus, if they don't have a lens, they can actually get stuck in rabbit holes. You also need to look at what feels more natural to you. For me, when people make fun of me at work all the time because I have to share my screen sometimes, like at my real job, that's not typecast. But I mean, typecast is my real job. My other job that pays the bills.
Yeah.
They'll make fun of me when I have to share my screen because I will have like 50 tabs open. But something that you guys, that they need to understand and that others need to understand is, for me as an introverted intuitive, like I leave them all up because I have such a problem with, it's almost like it causes me anxiety to shut a tab. Because I don't know, if I'm not focused, if I don't have a hardcore focus, I'm afraid to shut the tab because I'm afraid I'll forget the information. And if I haven't filtered through the information properly, I'm afraid my NI won't pick it up and it won't be incorporated into my framework. So I have to leave all these tabs open until I have intentionally, like carefully filtered through everything to make sure. So it's almost like backwards what you would expect. I can't have just one tab, because if I have not like thoroughly considered it, I can't close it.
And I really just need the gist of something.
So she doesn't have 50 tabs. And
So
you would think we'd be reversed, but
so
the motivation.
Actually, I was about to say, to focus on the motivation, I actually do have 50 tabs. However, that filters through my TE for a different reason. But, so like, again, motivation. You may also have 50 tabs open, as do I. However, two completely different reasons. Mine has nothing to do about hers. Mine is all about organization and making sure that I'm picking pieces apart and everything. It has nothing to do with what she just said. So don't look at that and be like, oh, I have 50 tabs open, I'm an NI user. That's not the case. It's not the case. It's the why behind it. It's what Jessie was trying to describe. She has to be able to intentionally hyper focus on this information so that it will live within her NI forever. And then once it's there, it'll never leave. Whereas for NE, I could take in that information and 3 weeks later, if I feel like I need to take in different information, I could be like, okay, I'm filing, flipping through. Oh, that thing I learned, I don't actually need that anymore. And it just goes to the back and it creates space for new information.
And again, it's also about the goals. So that example I just gave with the 50 tabs, it's because I'm sifting through information to see what makes sense to me. So when I am taking in information, when I am perceiving, because that's something else, is that perceiving functions don't have wills. They don't have like bents. They don't have logical reasoning behind them. Okay, they don't. But the way the lenses work is that they are filters. They are filters. I like filters better than lenses because they're, what are you pulling? What kind of information are you pulling? And I'm pulling things that will make sense in that system. Extroverted intuitives, sometimes they're exploring just to explore. But this was the point I was getting at that I didn't finish, is that extroverted intuitives, when they really care about something, they can go really deep, right? Introverted intuitives, they can get really anxious and look at lots of information when they don't have a frame that they're working within. So you also need to look at what's healthy for you.
What causes anxiety in you?
So, like, are you looking at lots of information, or are you being very focused with your information? And if you're being very focused, does that feel like a natural state to you? Or does that feel like kind of like you're looking for something very specific, like you're very anxious about it? What is the more positive one?
Yep. What makes you feel better? Honestly, it's a feel good thing too. Like you just feel good when you are living out like who you are, when you're really living these functions up and they are who you are. If I'm an NI user and I'm trying to force myself to focus on something the way an NI user would, it's not that I can't do it. It's that I'm not going to feel good doing it.
Exactly. We're going to talk about two specific things with taking in information, with taking in a new idea. So this first one is just talking to somebody at work and somebody gives you an idea that you've never considered before. So for instance, I don't know, something completely off the wall, like they're going to the moon in a different way. Like all of a sudden they're launching like a new commercial flights to the moon are happening, right? This is such like a random piece of information. Introverted intuitives have a tendency to not really always pay attention to an idea if they can't make it fit in their framework. So for me personally, like that idea came out of nowhere for me and I'm already thinking about it and I would be like, honestly, my first thought would be, what kind of type would want to go on the flight to the moon? Because everything in my mind is so based on Jungian analysts. And I'd be like, what kind of complex would a person have to do to like, I wonder if an ISTJ who's like in their extroverted intuitive grip would like want to go on this crazy thing. But that is exactly where my mind would go. So it's like I'm pulling in information and I'm filtering it. It's like my mind can't even look at that concept of, we are now doing commercial flights to the moon. I can't even look at that idea in a box without filtering it.
I would just get super, super excited for that person. And I would just be like, that is the coolest freaking thing I've ever heard. And then I would want all the information. She says that like 12 times a day. All the time. I think every idea deserves a chance. I think 90% of ideas deserve chances. But I would then want all the information. So like I would first be very excited and be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Good for you. Like, is there anything I can do to help? Like what, all these different things. then I would immediately be like, okay, you're not a scientist, though. You work here for like this company. So what are you doing? Like, I want to know how you got into this. Also, would I be interested in it? Could I go to the moon? Like, that would also absolutely be my next question. It's like, so how do I sign up for this? But yeah, it would be very positive. I could take the information immediately. I have little to no judgment on it.
It's very true.
Yes, I would just be very accepting of it and just let it sink in. Regardless of anything else, it would just enter my system and I would be okay with it for the time being.
And so now we're going to be talking about taking in bad news. So, because again, you have to run it through a filter. And the way that Amanda and I have decided to explain the way perceiving works is it's like you take in, everybody is perceiving information through their senses. We mentioned this in SE versus SI, I believe, or SE versus NE, I can't remember one of these, but it's like you are taking in information through your senses, but then it's like that in that split second, what does your mind do?
Yep.
And so everybody has to make that split second decision, and it is a mental process. These are the patterns that your mind typically does. So for me, like if I was given bad news, like I'm trying to think of something. Okay, with COVID going on, there's been lots of really quick changes to how society is running, and it's like it causes such a disruption to my external environment that my introverted intuition can't do what it wants. So it's almost like I don't even know how to process the change, because introverted intuition is an inside process, but I can only do it if my external environment is calm and chilled out. Otherwise, I have to rely on my external functions, and I don't like them very much. So I have to take a lot of time to, and Amanda has said this before, it's like I kick around an idea for like 3 or 4 days before I can even process it, and I want to do it inside. Yes, my introverted thinking is doing stuff with information. Yes, my extroverted feeling is doing stuff with information. But the point is, my introverted intuition is that filter. And if I am taking in something bad, taking in something different, taking in something that I have no idea how to make it work within the way that my mind is currently set up for, I have to take days sometimes to process that information. And so yes, again, all of the other functions are doing their thing, but the point is that it's getting stopped. It's getting stopped through this introverted intuitive filter, and it would happen that same way for an introverted sensor. It stops if they don't have an experience to pull from or something that they've learned. If they don't know how to make that work in their head, they stop. It takes them a long time to change. It's
almost like the information doesn't hit you yet.
Yeah. It's a lot like that. I had a hard time processing that we were in quarantine.
Yeah.
It was horrifying.
So from the NE perspective, just like we said with new ideas, I immediately get excited and I'm like, yes, this is great. Let me help. Let me know more. Let's get into this. And now later on, I may decide, well, that's not really a great idea. But in that first moment, because it'll filter through other functions of mine. But in that first moment, my very first instinct is to accept the idea as it is and say, yes, this is awesome. With bad information, there's kind of like two different ways that I can accept that information here. So one could be that I immediately take it in and it's really bad news, and I immediately start thinking of all the possibilities that are going to stem from this bad news, which might immediately cause me to stress about the small stuff, stress about stuff that may or may not even happen, because I'm literally now caught up in this web of, oh my gosh, I took in this information, and then without even pausing on that information, because NE doesn't pause the way NI does, I now have accepted this idea, I've accepted this information, and now I'm branching off to all those possibilities. And that happens within a split second. It's not like I decided to accept it. It just flows into me and is now in me. And then I'm now thinking of all these possibilities. So that's one way. And that's a very bad situation to be in.
However, how quickly does it take you to get over it?
The second that I can pause, I can get over it. And I'm like through it. I'm done. So that's the second way I guess it's not really a second. It is kind of a second way because the older, I'll say it this way, the older I get, the less I immediately take that information and run with it and let my mind go wild with all the possibilities. So the older I get, the more I'm able to kind of put a pause on it. When I was younger, I was not able to do that at all whatsoever. Like my mom literally always, she bought me this book that is called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and all of these different anxiety books, because I would constantly be fearing the worst, even if I had nothing, like logically there was nothing to fear. I would always fear the worst because of that. Because I could see that potentially there's a 1% chance that this bad thing could stem from this, and it would cause a lot of anxiety. But
I wanna just insert here real quick. Amanda was young when this was happening. She was developing her extroverted intuition was coming into play. Like, this is her lead function. Mm-hmm. That's the function that she would see the most. So something that's super important here is that it wasn't an inferior, because as you age, those functions come more into play. So it's almost, so for a person who leads with introverted sensing, you could have extroverted intuition as your inferior function, and you could fear all of the possibilities, especially as you get older and your SI gets stronger. You can become more afraid of that. But the important thing to note is that Amanda was running with possibilities all the time. Yeah. It's just that sometimes they would become incredibly negative, but a lot of times they didn't. Right. So if you are somebody who is are maybe like you're afraid of crowds and you like don't leave your house type of thing, that's not what she's talking about. No. I just want to be clear, because a lot of people have, most of the population actually has extroverted intuition as their inferior function. Mm-hmm. What is it? Like 30% of people have that as their inferior. So a lot of you probably relate to what I'm saying, but you probably relate it now, like in your 20s, 30s, 40s. But for me, I'm talking about when I was like 7 or 8. This is what my mind was doing. This is what I knew. This is what I grew up with. So now that being said, again, the older I get, the more I am able to decide to put a pause on it. I have a little bit more control over it than I did. And so now what I can do is I can immediately hear the bad information, and it's almost like I still take it in. I will never not take it in. That's just not who I am. I won't have a wall immediately. I'm not able to do that the way that I can. However, what I can do now is take it in, and I can make the decision to immediately filter it through a different function. And so that has taken a lot of personal growth and a lot of work on my anxiety to get to that point. Once again, type development is so huge here. Eventually, the older you get, you're going to be able to do that organically anyways. But it is something that I've actively worked on. So I can take in bad information and almost immediately be able to be like, that sucked, but here's my next step. I can immediately filter it in that way. And so those are examples for NI versus NE. So one of the big things is why this matters so much too for the world is because both extroverted intuition and introverted intuition are important for the world, because they have a lot to offer. But introverted intuitives and extroverted intuitives are often at odds, and Amanda and I are each other's shadows. So we're a great example of people who would be at the odds, because sometimes, like, as we are going into this business venture, this whole research project together, we're doing this, she knows that when she has a new idea, because Amanda thinks of 50 new ideas in a second. And something else I've noticed about extroverted intuition is Amanda doesn't always care about doing the thing. Sometimes she cares about the idea of the thing. It's like she will have 50 ideas and she's okay if she only ever does one. I am not okay with that. I am not okay with that at all, because I have extroverted sensing inferior and I want to do things. Like, why would we talk about this if we're never going to do it? And I'm still struggling with accepting that extroverted intuition can be okay with the idea of a thing. I have a very dear ENTP friend and we talk about things all the time, and I still struggle with accepting the fact that she can bring up an idea and it cannot even be her opinion. She just wants to talk about this idea. And I'm like, why? Why would you do that? Because that's how they work. They like to play with ideas. That is how their perceiving information and perceiving function works. That's the lens through which they see the world, is that almost like all ideas, all possibilities, all realities are valid, which blows my mind.
Oh yeah, like there's always and even if it's not that particular idea, then let's tweak it and make it work. You know, I was actually did want to bring up one of our good friends now that we've met through all of this is an ESTP, and so we started talking because our hero functions are each other's demon functions. And so I have an SE demon, he has an NE demon. And so out of any function, that one is just the hardest for us to tap into because it is just so unnatural to us. So we wanted to get to know each other more. And so Jesse hooked us up and we've been talking. And one thing that he said, I was throwing out some ideas, not even realizing that I was throwing out some ideas because that's just my daily conversation. And he was like, okay, I'm going to have to think about that. And I immediately pulled back because I was like, oh, I touched his NI. Like I could feel it almost instantly. And I was like, okay, I'll give you some time. I've learned that by using this language with Jessie, where she will tell me she'll need time. And before I'd be like, what is there to think about? I mean, honestly, why don't we just do it? What is there to think about? And now I know. There's so much to think about.
So much, dude.
So much. I still don't think about it, but I let her think about it.
She does.
And she needs her time. And so even with that being his inferior function, he has it developed where he does have to, I mean, he has an SE hero. So you would think he would just also take it and run with it.
But this was these were a lot of abstract. Like
yes.
he has to, sometimes we do one at a time.
Yeah.
Because he gets like, it can almost make him feel sick sometimes.
Yes.
When we're pushing too hard for the abstract. Kind of like, and Amanda and I will have moments too of like we're too in the moment. Like I've experienced like pure reality where I felt like I was like actually like attached to reality.
It makes you like dizzy.
Like, yeah, I actually get physically ill, and Marie-Louise von Franz talks about it. So it's like you can't, and since we are talking to him on the internet, like you can't push abstract too hard on somebody who's based on reality, because if they're not like in that space. So that's what she means when she's like she has to take a step back, because
I needed to let him have that time. And so I literally was like, okay, take the time you need. And then it was just a few minutes later, and he was in the moment, so he was able to within a few minutes come up with a response. It didn't take him days or anything, but it was because he was in it with me, like he was in that conversation. But after those few moments, we started talking about how I was able to just like easily accept something. And he was like, it almost seems like NE doesn't care when it's wrong or if it's wrong. And I was like,
NE as itself does not, but FITI do.
Right.
And I just want to give that warning because ENTPs.
Yes. It is.
Even
ENTPs are, both.
Yeah.
But like NE, again, looking at it in a vacuum, we're totally fine. We don't own this idea. We don't own the idea that we just threw out into the world. We just threw it out there to see what's going to happen next and to see like who picks it up or what we can do with it or can we play with it or whatever. It's not our idea that we threw out there. So if you stomp on it and you're like, I hate this, I'm like, all right, forget I said it. Like, let's move on. Not a big deal.
Unless it comes from their TIFI. Because I do know people who get their feelings hurt very badly if you consider it completely invalid.
Yes. Whereas NI though won't even throw out an idea unless they're set on it. And if they throw out that idea and you stomp on it, you're not friends.
Nope. At least
done.
Once upon a time. Now I'm very wise about who I share things with.
Yes.
So, couple things here. So NE and NI, stop fighting. The end. That's what we were talking about. That was the whole point of that. Is please stop fighting, because the world needs both. Because Introverted Intuition, you guys would not be watching Typecast Heroes without Extroverted Intuition, because she had to push me forward to do this. Like, this project would not exist without her pushing, because that's what Extroverted Intuition does. So we have to keep that in mind, that they need each other.
They do need each other. And
very much.
Also, my NE would not know all the things it knows to the level that it knows them without her doing all this research and all of these conversations and all these studies, because her hyper focus is truly how this content gets out here. So without each other, this just wouldn't be what it is.
Nope. So we need each other. So intuitives, if you're an introverted intuitive, go find yourself an extroverted one. And if you're an extrovert, probably hook up with an introverted one.
100% hook up with an introverted one.
It'll make your lives easier.
And then just be calm while they take their time.
Yeah, learn patience.
Learn some patience.
Introverted intuitives need to learn patience too, though, because we can be really impatient. I can be like,
or maybe
Amanda,
just
focus.
Be like, Yeah, I was gonna say, be a little bit less judgy.
Yeah, just learn patience and learn how to not be so judgy.
And also learn this language, because literally we'll have conversations where she's like, your FI is getting in the way here. And I'll be like, your TI is being a brat. Yeah. And we can literally have that
She was
language.
talking about her job earlier, and I was thinking, Amanda, your TE child.
Yeah, my TE child
needs to be punched in the face right now.
Yeah.
It needs timeout.
Yep. And we can use that language, and it's like, it's really the best. It really, really is. Again, we're shadows, so if there's anyone who shouldn't be able to do what we're doing, it should be us.
Theoretically. Mm-hmm. But also, you need to remember a couple more things before we go. If you can't figure out your intuitive process still, you should be able to, but if you can't, we've got lots of other resources, so go check them out. Also, which one of us bugs you more? Because that was also where we're going with that, is that because extroverted intuitives and introverted intuitives cancel each other out, they're anti each other. I don't care. They are against each other. Typically, they work against each other. Which one of us bugs you more? Because if you can figure that out, you probably know that you're the opposite. Also, we have the axis you have to keep in mind, that extroverted intuition is on an axis with introverted sensing, and introverted intuition is with extroverted sensing. So we have videos on all of those, and you can watch to figure out which one is grounding you out. You can go watch the SI versus SE video, and then you can kind of figure it out. And we also have videos out there on the inferior functions themselves and child and all that stuff, so you can see if it was your opposite, what it would appear to you. Because being human is hard, and this should make it just a little bit easier. So Amanda's going to tell you what to do real quick. Like, comment, subscribe. Please. You guys have been amazing, and we just appreciate it so much. And if this is the very first video that you've ever watched from TCH, please go watch our very first video, Welcome to Typecast Heroes, where you can learn all about the project, the interviews, basically what Typecast Heroes is. And then, if you are interested in participating in some of these interviews and in this project, please comment below or message us on Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, or Discord, and we'll go ahead and get you set up for an interview. Thanks so much. Bye.
Let's gather around the type fire and sing our type fire song. Our MBTITYPOLOGY song. And if you feel uncomfortable, then know there's nothing wrong.